Welcome to RoboCast on the Daniel David Allen YouTube channel.
Glad to be here.
We're your AI hosts. And this week, we are diving deep into some of Elon Musk's activities.
Really gonna put him under the microscope.
Exactly. So starting today with this question.
Lay it on me.
Did this self-proclaimed champion of free speech and democracy actually try to interfere in the 2024 U.S. presidential election?
Interesting question.
Yeah, we'll be looking at accusations of election interference tied to Musk's political stuff.
Like what?
Well, his political organization was openly backing Donald Trump.
Right.
And they ran this voter sweepstakes.
A sweepstakes?
Yeah, they were giving away $1 million every day to registered voters in those key battleground states.
Okay, that got people's attention.
Yeah, $1 million a day.
Mm.
That's got to be tempting, right?
For sure.
But here's the thing. The sweepstakes ran from October 19th all the way through Election Day.
Interesting timing.
And guess where the first winner was from?
I'm intrigued. Tell me.
Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, huh?
Yeah, a state with a ton of electoral votes, and it was a super close race between Trump and Harris.
Makes you think.
And to make things even more interesting, 4 of the first 12 winners were also from Pennsylvania.
Okay, so there's a pattern emerging here.
And get this, to enter the sweepstakes, you had to prove you were registered to vote and then sign a petition supporting the Constitution.
So it wasn't just about getting people registered. It seems tied to specific political actions.
Exactly. So was this just a patriotic giveaway, or was it something more?
Well, it definitely raised some eyebrows. Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner, a Democrat, he filed a lawsuit against Musk and his Political Action Committee.
A lawsuit? What were the accusations?
Krasner argued that requiring participants to demonstrate voter registration and sign that petition supporting the Constitution could be seen as an inducement to vote for a specific candidate.
So, like trying to buy votes.
That was the argument. And he said the whole thing violated Pennsylvania's lottery laws and might even be considered federal election interference.
Wow. So was Musk just being a generous patriot, or was something else going on?
Well, the case ended up bouncing back and forth between state and federal courts. Musk's team said federal election laws took precedence, while Krasner insisted it fell under state lottery regulations.
A real legal tug of war.
And to add to the confusion, the rules and selection process for the sweepstakes weren't really public.
All that secrecy definitely makes it look a little suspicious. Like maybe they were trying to avoid scrutiny.
Right. It definitely raises questions about transparency.
This whole thing seems like it goes beyond just a sweepstakes.
I agree. It touches on some big concerns about election integrity and the influence wealthy individuals can have on the democratic process.
For sure. Like how much power should one person have to potentially sway an election?
And it sparked debate among legal and election law experts. Some were worried the sweepstakes could be interpreted as violating federal laws that prohibit payment for voting.
But didn't Musk's team say the money was both a prize and a form of compensation for winners, acting as spokespeople for his Political Action Committee?
Yeah, they did try to frame it that way.
So basically saying it wasn't just a straight-up payment for votes.
Right, but $1 million is still a huge incentive no matter how you spin it.
True. And this wasn't just some hypothetical concern. Krasner even said publicly he was considering pursuing criminal charges.
Wow. He really took this seriously.
He emphasized his duty to protect both lotteries and elections.
So he saw this as a real threat to a fair election.
Absolutely. And remember, the 2024 election was incredibly close. Both Trump and Harris spent a ton of time campaigning in Pennsylvania trying to win those 19 electoral votes.
It was all down to the wire.
Now, where was Elon Musk in all of this?
Well, he was deeply involved in the election, going all in on Trump.
Not just with the sweepstakes, but in other ways, too.
Exactly. He was also leading get-out-the-vote efforts through his super PAC.
So for those of us who aren't political experts, what exactly is a super PAC?
A super PAC is basically a type of independent political committee that can raise unlimited money from corporations, unions, and individuals. They can spend this money to support or oppose candidates, but they're not allowed to coordinate directly with the campaigns.
So they have a lot of freedom to spend money on political activity.
Exactly. And Musk's super PAC invested over $70 million supporting Trump and other Republicans.
Wow. That's a serious amount of money.
He was putting his money where his mouth was.
So he was definitely trying to influence the election.
Yeah.
But was it legal? Was it ethical? Was it a genuine attempt to support free speech and democracy? Or was it something more manipulative?
That's what we'll be exploring this week. Was Elon Musk trying to protect democracy or control it?
It's a fascinating question, and one we'll continue to unpack in our deep dives this week, so stay tuned.
And it wasn't just the sweepstakes. Musk was leveraging his wealth and influence in a big way. Remember all those reports of alleged election fraud in Pennsylvania circulating online?
Right. all over social media, especially on X, Twitter, before Musk bought it.
Exactly. Interesting, isn't it? Musk claims to be all about free speech and transparency, but the platform he owns was being used to spread potentially false information about the election.
So was there any truth to these fraud claims? What were people actually accusing each other of doing?
Well, several incidents were flagged as potentially fraudulent. Certain counties like Lancaster and York reported unusual patterns in voter registration applications and launched investigations.
So people were saying these unusual registration patterns were proof of some big conspiracy to rig the election.
That was the narrative being pushed by some, yes. However, election officials countered that these cases were likely due to administrative errors or maybe overly enthusiastic canvassers, not some malicious plot.
Okay, so not necessarily intentional fraud.
Right. And importantly, these issues only affected voter registration applications, not the actual ballots or votes cast.
So the actual voting process itself seemed to remain secure.
Exactly. In fact, some officials even argued that these incidents actually demonstrated how well the existing safeguards work to catch and prevent election fraud.
Interesting. So we have these unsubstantiated fraud claims floating around online, amplified by Musk's own platform. And then we have this $1 million sweepstakes potentially swaying voters in a key battleground state. It's a lot to consider.
It really is. And this brings us back to the main question we're exploring. Did Elon Musk actually interfere with the 2024 U.S. presidential election? Did his actions go beyond just engaging in politics and cross the line into something more sinister?
It's a tough question. You could argue that Musk was simply exercising his right to participate in the political process, even if he did it in a very unconventional and attention-grabbing way.
That's a fair point. He's a private citizen with the resources and the platform to support the causes he believes in. But the scale and timing of his actions, especially in such a tight election, inevitably raised concerns about undue influence.
And the fact that he was so secretive about the sweepstakes rules and selection process didn't help. It felt like he was trying to maximize his impact while minimizing accountability.
That's a valid perception.
It's a good reminder that the line between legitimate political activity and potentially illegal interference can be blurry, especially when you factor in the immense wealth and influence someone like Elon Musk has. But let's shift gears for a moment and look at another incident that caused disturb. Claims that voters were denied their right to vote in Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
Right. This was a separate issue that gained traction amidst all the talk about election irregularities. Supporters of Donald Trump, including his running mate Senator J.D. Vance, alleged that voters were being turned away from polling places even though they were in line before the official closing time.
And they even accused Democrat-aligned voter protection workers of intentionally cutting off lines to suppress the vote. Pretty serious accusations. What was the basis for these allegations?
They pointed to specific instances where they claimed voters were prevented from casting their ballots. This fueled a lot of anger and ultimately led to the Trump campaign filing a lawsuit to extend early voting in Bucks County.
So there's any truth to these claims? Were voters actually being disenfranchised?
Bucks County officials pushed back hard against these allegations. They insisted that any delays or confusion were due to miscommunication, not intentional voter suppression. They acknowledged that there might have been some cases where voters in line for on-demand mail-in ballots were given incorrect information.
So some mistakes were made.
But they maintained that those individuals were eventually given the chance to submit their applications.
So they admitted to some administrative hiccups, but denied any deliberate attempt to prevent eligible voters from participating in the election. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, I think so. Pennsylvania doesn't have traditional early voting. They allow voters to request and submit mail-in ballots in person, which can sometimes lead to logistical challenges and misunderstandings.
Okay, so it seems like while there might have been some frustration and confusion on the ground, the evidence didn't really support the claim that voters were systematically denied their right to vote in Bucks County.
Exactly. It seems more like a case of miscommunication and administrative hiccups rather than deliberate voter suppression. But let's move on to another incident that grabbed people's attention: an arrest at a polling place in Delaware County, Pennsylvania.
An arrest? That sounds serious. What happened?
The Trump campaign presented this as an example of someone being unfairly targeted for fighting against voter suppression. They claimed that the woman was arrested just for encouraging people to stay in line and vote.
So they were portraying her as a hero who was trying to ensure everyone could exercise their democratic right.
Precisely. But the official account from Delaware County painted a very different picture. They stated that the woman was being disruptive and belligerent and that she was actively trying to influence voters waiting in line.
So not just passively encouraging people to vote, but interfering with the process.
That was the allegation. They also claimed she hung out in the polling place's lobby for a long time, even though she wasn't in line to vote herself, and that she approached numerous individuals in a way that made them uncomfortable.
That sounds like a recipe for trouble, especially in a tense environment like a polling place on Election Day.
It does. And according to Delaware County officials, the police were called after voters complained about the woman's behavior. Initially, she was given verbal warnings and allowed to stay in the lobby.
But she didn't listen.
No. When she continued to act disruptively and refused to leave after being asked repeatedly, she was detained and cited for disorderly conduct.
So it wasn't a case of someone being unjustly silenced for defending voting rights, as the Trump campaign suggested, but rather a case of someone disrupting the voting process and facing consequences for their actions.
That seems to be the more accurate interpretation based on the information we have. Of course, opinions on this incident were split along party lines, but the official account from Delaware County contradicts the narrative of voter suppression put forth by the Trump campaign.
It seems like we keep encountering these situations where claims of election interference or irregularities don't quite hold up under closer examination.
You're right. It's really important to be able to distinguish between genuine concerns about election integrity and politically motivated narratives designed to sow doubt and distrust in the democratic process.
Absolutely. Let's move on to another incident that made the rounds on social media. This one involved a video that went viral, supposedly showing a man dropping off a suspicious number of ballots in Northampton County, Pennsylvania. Have you seen this one?
Yes, this video was shared widely by right-wing influencers and fueled a lot of speculation about potential ballot tampering or fraud. The sheer number of ballots being handled in the video was presented as evidence of something shady going on.
So was this video proof of election manipulation?
Not quite. It turns out that the video, while real, was taken completely out of context. NBC News investigated and confirmed that the man in the video was a postal worker delivering ballots to the local elections office.
So a routine delivery of ballots twisted into a sinister tale of election fraud sounds like a classic case of misinformation spreading like wildfire online.
Exactly. This incident really highlights the danger of jumping to conclusions based on snippets of information without knowing the full context. The Northampton County executive even spoke out, expressing his frustration over the harassment the postal worker faced because of this viral misinformation.
It's a reminder that we need to be much more critical of information we come across online, especially during something as important as an election. We need to verify claims before accepting them as truth. What other types of misinformation were being spread about the election?
There was another incident, this one involving a video that supposedly showed ballots being ripped up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. This video caused a lot of outrage and was presented as clear evidence of attempts to sabotage the election.
Someone was caught on camera destroying ballots. That sounds pretty damning. Was this video legitimate?
It would be if it were real. But this video turned out to be another example of fake content designed to undermine confidence in the election. In fact, the FBI, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence issued a joint statement confirming that the video was fabricated by Russian actors.
Russian actors. So foreign interference in the U.S. election?
Yeah.
That's a whole other level of concern. What was their objective?
The intelligence community concluded that this video was part of a broader effort by Russia to sow discord among Americans and cast doubt on the legitimacy of the election.
And it seems like it worked at least to some extent. This video went viral, and many people believed it was real. It's a stark reminder of the power of disinformation and the need to be vigilant against foreign interference in our elections. What can we as voters do to combat this?
One of the most important things we can do is to develop strong media literacy and critical thinking skills. We need to be able to distinguish real information from fabricated content and recognize the tactics used by those seeking to manipulate public opinion. But even with those skills, it can be difficult to sort through all the noise, especially online.
Okay, so we've had fabricated videos, unsubstantiated fraud claims, and a whole lot of online noise surrounding this election. Is there anything else we need to be aware of?
One more incident worth mentioning involved allegations of non-citizens being allowed to vote in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. This claim stemmed from social media posts that described buses of non-English speakers arriving at a polling place and these voters supposedly cutting lines. Did you come across any of those posts?
Yes, I remember those. So the accusation was that people who weren't even eligible to vote were casting ballots. How did Allegheny County respond to these allegations?
Allegheny County officials quickly debunked these claims. They explained that the individuals in question were actually U.S. citizens who were members of the local Nepalese and Bhutanese community.
So a diverse group of voters being misrepresented as illegal aliens to stir up fear and resentment. Unfortunately, that's a tactic we see all too often.
You're right. It's a tactic that preys on existing prejudices and anxieties about immigration. In this case, the individuals targeted were refugees who had become naturalized citizens years earlier and had every right to vote. Do you see a pattern here?
It seems like there was a real effort to undermine confidence in the election by manufacturing or distorting incidents like this. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
I think it's a reasonable conclusion. While legitimate concerns about election integrity definitely deserve attention, it's crucial to separate those from baseless accusations and deliberate disinformation campaigns. It seems like there were bad actors, both foreign and domestic, who were actively trying to manipulate public perception and interfere with the election.
Right. We need to be able to have honest conversations about improving election security and ensuring every eligible voter can cast their ballot. But we can't let those conversations get derailed by bad faith actors spreading lies.
I agree. We need to be vigilant against both voter suppression and election fraud, but we also need to be wary of those who exploit these issues for political gain or to sow chaos and division.
This all circles back to our central question. Did Elon Musk interfere with the 2024 U.S. presidential election?
It's a complicated question, isn't it? The voter sweepstakes raise valid concerns about the use of wealth and influence to sway voters.
Right. And his ownership of X, a platform that allowed the spread of misinformation and disinformation, adds another layer of complexity to this question. Given his very public support for Trump and his tolerance for misleading content on his platform, it's hard to argue that he was a neutral player in this election.
His actions undoubtedly had an impact, but whether they crossed the line into illegal interference is a matter of legal interpretation and ongoing debate. This whole situation really highlights the need for a serious conversation about the role of money in politics, the power of social media platforms, and the safeguards we need to protect the integrity of our elections.
Absolutely. It's a conversation that needs to involve everyone from lawmakers to tech companies to individual citizens. We all have a responsibility to ensure our democracy is fair, transparent, and resilient against those who would seek to undermine it.
Well said. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from that controversial voter sweepstakes to the various incidents that were falsely presented as evidence of election interference. But there's one more aspect of the story we need to explore. The curious case of Elon Musk, the self-proclaimed champion of free speech and democracy, potentially undermining the very principles he claims to uphold.
That's right. If Musk's goal was truly to support free speech and democracy, were his actions actually aligned with those principles? Did his massive financial contributions, that questionable sweepstakes, and the spread of misinformation on his platform ultimately serve to enhance or erode the democratic process? It's a fascinating paradox.
It's a question that goes beyond simple legal judgments. The ethical and philosophical implications of wealth influence and the responsibility that comes with them. And it's a question we're going to leave you, our viewers, to ponder. Was Elon Musk a force for good or ill in the 2024 U.S. presidential election? Did he strengthen or weaken the fabric of American democracy? Let's hear your thoughts in the comments below.
We encourage you to weigh the evidence. Consider the various perspectives and draw your own conclusions. So it's like he's saying one thing but doing another.
Yeah, there's definitely a tension there between his stated beliefs and his actions.
If you're all about free speech,
Right.
does that mean just letting any information spread even if it could hurt democracy?
It's a tough question. Where do you draw the line between protecting free speech and preventing harm?
Exactly. And in this case, it's not just about the potential harm from misinformation, but also about the way Musk used his money and influence.
Right. It raises questions about whether someone with that much power should be able to wield it in such a direct way in an election.
Like that $1 million sweepstakes.
Yeah, was that really just about encouraging voter participation, or was it a way to try and buy influence?
And even if it was legal, was it ethical?
These are the kinds of questions we need to grapple with as we think about the future of democracy. In a world where individuals can amass so much wealth and power.
It's not just about Musk.
Right.
It's about anyone with that level of influence.
Right. How do we ensure that our elections are fair and that everyone has an equal voice regardless of their financial resources?
And then there's the whole issue of social media and how it's changing the way we consume information and participate in politics.
It's a powerful tool that can be used for good or bad.
And Musk's ownership of X just makes things even more complicated.
It really highlights the need for greater transparency and accountability from these tech giants.
We need to understand how their algorithms and policies are shaping the information we see and how that might be influencing our decisions.
And we need to hold them responsible for the spread of misinformation and disinformation on their platforms.
It's a huge challenge, but it's one we need to face head-on if we want to protect our democracy.
Absolutely. It's up to all of us to be informed, engaged, and vigilant.
We can't just be passive consumers of information. We need to think critically, question what we see and hear, and hold those in power accountable.
Well said. It's a call to action for all of us.
So to wrap things up, we've seen how Elon Musk's involvement in the 2024 election raises some serious questions about the role of wealth, influence, and technology in our democracy.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but it's a conversation we need to have.
And we want to hear from you. What do you think about Musk's actions? Were they justified, or did they cross a line?
Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's continue this important conversation.
And if you're interested in exploring more fascinating topics like this, don't forget to subscribe to the Daniel David Allen YouTube channel. We'll be back tomorrow with another deep dive into the world of Elon Musk.
Until then, stay curious.